All right, let's do this, guys. Speechless by Ko Un. Loose translation / interpretation by Michael R. Birch. At Auschwitz, piles of glasses, mountains of shoes. Returning, we stared out different windows.
All right, first impressions.
It's crazy how much can get packed into just 4 lines of poetry. It's really cool. And then I think it's interesting that it starts off right away with at Auschwitz, that alliteration of the sound. It really makes you kind of sit up and pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about form first?
Yeah.
Like the first thing that I definitely noticed with like the kind of like what you look at when you're looking at the poem is that as the poem goes down, it gets much longer very quickly.
Like the line lengths?
Each line is much longer
Right.
than the last. And it reminds me, it builds some of an image of a pile or a mountain.
Right.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Right.
But it also kind of builds the idea of something that's growing very, very quickly, which could be an like metaphor for the like Nazi regime. Just kind of the time where they came, it seemed like they were nothing at first, and then their impact was so great.
Yeah.
You didn't even compare it to anything from like before.
Excellent.
I love how the actual structure of the poem helps to reflect the meaning.
Right.
That's really cool.
Right. Anybody else?
Yeah. What really stood out to me was the second and fourth lines. When the image of those piles of glasses that have been taken away from the prisoners in Auschwitz, and then as these prisoners return home, they stare out different windows, not only because their vision has been altered since their glasses have been taken away from them, but also because they've had this terrible experience happen to them, which has changed their perception of the world.
That's so interesting how it uses that same symbol of glasses looking through something.
Lens. Right.
That's really cool. I love that.
Right.
And it could be that it's a bit of a journey where it says the glasses, at the beginning they see one way, the shoes, they walk through this terrible journey, and then the windows is they see a different way at the end.
Wow, we
That's
steer
so
out different
good.
windows.
I love that. That specific.
That's good.
He didn't just pick the author because the prisoners at Auschwitz lost everything, but he picked specifically glasses and then shoes, so that word choice.
Symbolic.
Right.
Because I initially read this very, very straight as somebody returning to Auschwitz and seeing
that's what I saw it too,
and then staring out different windows, basically thinking you can't even speak when you think of this level of inhumanity, and so to avoid it,
speechless.
right? He's speechless, right? And you can't possibly. So you just sit there in silence, and yet. I love Abby's connection and seeing that there is this lens and these different windows that we can either, because of the ways that we walk and the things that we see, that it makes our lives very, very different.
And I love that we can read the same poem and have 2 different interpretations, but they're both so valid.
Exactly.
Right.
And for me, I this is a poem that's imagery. It is imagery with the sight, because the 2 main things you're seeing are the pile of glasses and the mountain of shoes, which if you look at the poem, other than at Auschwitz, which are capitalized, there's no capitalization. And I think that's a choice to basically show that everything was ripped from these Holocaust victims, their capitalization, their proper names, their all their respect. And ultimately, we just get this image of what was left over that was valuable of them, their glasses and their shoes.
Wow.
And I love that the poem pushes you from line to line with the enjambment, because since it doesn't have any punctuation, you know that this is all just one long sentence that starts with at Auschwitz and doesn't end until the period after windows. And as when you're reading the poem, when you don't have a comma after each line, because the comma would tell you to take a breath and to pause, it makes you feel as if you are going through this journey yourself, where very quickly you go from your regular life and then you move from line to line, losing more and more until you're a completely different person.
And I thought that the choice of a comma in the 4th line really puts a break on it, where they're talking, the author is talking, at all the piles of glasses, mountains of shoes, returning, and then it's that
Right.
reflection
Yes,
upon
that's so
going
good.
Right.
that-
Going back, seeing
that
it
they're
afresh.
seeing it from a different they're seeing it from different windows because they're coming back and it's much later.
Yes.
But it's also like they're finally taking the time to reflect on what actually happened.
That's so good. And you could also see it like with that returning, you made me think of, you could also see it as if the piles of glasses and the mountains of shoes are what is returning. So like
returning, you could read that.
Like the people are coming back.
Oh, wow.
Like
right,
the ideas are coming back to you. So like I'm visualizing this
Yeah.
narrator, like maybe they were a prisoner and now they're coming back to visit Auschwitz for the first time, and they're at Auschwitz, and even though everything is gone, the piles of glasses and the mountains of shoes are returning to them.
Yes.
And they're staring at different windows of like their eyes, kind of.
That's so interesting too, because the poem, like the form, the way that it builds out, it's kind of like this flood of like memories.
Wow, right.
Like,
could be that
Auschwitz,
too.
Piles of glasses, mountains of shoes returning.
Like you've pulled this thread and now it's all coming
like
undone.
Fast and Furious.
All right. Awesome.
That was awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Great poem.
This is like a huge stretch, but in the first line you mentioned the alliteration of A. And well, if you're thinking of like a pile or a mountain.
Oh.
I don't know.
Not a huge stretch. Not a huge stretch.
That is so
You
good.
mentioned the capitalization. Those are the only things that are capitalized in a like lowercase a wouldn't have that shape to it.
Yeah.
That's so
Valuable. Everybody has something to share. Everybody has something.